So hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you the metal tooling or repousse technique. For this technique, we're going to be using some aluminum sheet metal and some wooden tools to push and pull the metal into form. This is called relief sculpture. So if I hold this from the side, you can actually see that that letter J, is raised off the surface of the metal. And that's because we drew the J on and we flipped this over and used our wooden tools to push that metal out and then make sure that this outside stays nice and flat. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to do that. At the end of the video, I'm going to talk to you about how to plan for a final design and how to transfer your design, your sketch, onto your final metal, because these little pieces of metal are our testers, and this is the size of our final metal. It's about 6 inches by 6 inches right now. Now, as you can see, these pieces of metal, they're just sheet metal, and they're sort of thinner than like a soda can, but a little bit thicker than aluminum foil. And they are taped. I have tape around the edges here, just some thin masking tape, because it is quite sharp on the edges. So if you are purchasing this on your own and cutting this up, you can use scissors, you can use a paper cutter actually to cut the metal. It's not so thin, but just be mindful that when you're working, you have tape on the outside edges. Now you will find all of these pieces of sheet metal in one of these baskets or something up in the front of the room. There's a few left right now, but I would encourage you to take as many as you want or need, because I want you to really practice this technique as much as possible before you get to your final metal. That way you know the limits of this material and you can do a really good job on your final piece. So let's get started. So to get started, you will need to collect your supplies. You're going to need, of course, at least one piece of sheet metal, as well as your multiple tools. There are a lot of tools up in the front. I like this one the most. You can see it's like the dirtiest because it's been used the most, but I've recently purchased these as well. This is good for making it flat, and this one is exactly the same as that, but I prefer the width of this. It feels like a pencil to me. This one's a little heavy. You will also need newspaper. So as you can see here, I have some newspaper, but I want to show you just how much, because that is really important. Here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, looks like there's some tape, 7 pads of newspaper, meaning like it's part of a newspaper, right? And you need that cushion in order to stretch the metal. Essentially, we're stretching that metal out from behind, okay? So I would collect my supplies. I would have these supplies in front of me while you're watching this video so you feel comfortable and you can sort of feel it. If you want to work with me, feel free. If you wanted to watch the video first and then try and play, feel free to do that as well. All right, so to get started, we don't need the newspaper right yet, and you just need one of your tools. You're going to want to sketch out a design on your little tester. Now they're pretty small, right? So you want a design that has some width to it. You want it to be like, you know, at least as thick as this tool, so you can start to push that out. And you don't want it to get too close to the edges. You want to leave that tape undisturbed. Whatever you want, I don't care. I'm going to start by drawing on here. You're going to just freehand sketch something. I'm going to do the letter A. And you can see I'm pushing pretty hard, like a normal pencil sort of pressure. And you can see that I'm starting to dent that metal, but I'm really not making a huge impact on that metal whatsoever. So I can sketch that out. If I don't like it, I can use another tool to like push that down again. You see how I flattened that out a little bit more? I'm gonna try and put that back because I liked that. But you want to sketch out your design, whatever you want, and you can see, again, even if I push super duper hard, I'm not really denting it too much, and that's because I'm working on a hard surface, and that's what the newspaper is for. So step 1, draw on your design, whatever that is. Don't be too complicated, especially for the first one. And then you're going to want to bring over your newspaper and start to work from the front. So once I have my design sketched, I'm going to want to deepen those edges, and then I can turn it over and start to work from the back. So I'm going to apply the same pressure I did here, and I want you to see the difference. If I take this and I push Do you see how much of a difference that has made, right? You can feel it right across. So if you have your metal in person right in front of you and you want to try that, you can feel that difference right away. It makes a huge dent. So I'm going to carefully push. I don't want to push too hard because I don't want to rip through. It is easy to rip through. I'm going to push and trace over my design. I'm going to get some ink from the newspaper on my hands. But I'm going to gently, applying my pressure, trace over my design, especially this little piece in here. And that creates my first true like dents into that metal. So if you were sitting next to me, I'd say, okay, feel that. You can see the difference right away. If you want to rewind the video and see like that difference from working on the table to working on the newspaper, this cushion has allowed this material to stretch out. All right, so that's step one, sketch, and then deepen your lines. Step two would be to turn this over and start to work from the back. Essentially what we're going to do is we are going to start to color, right, or push this whole space, the interior space, forward, which is going to pop it out, and then we'll flip over to the other side and we'll flatten this outside and we'll flatten that interior space for the A. Now, although we're going to just start to push that out, my pro tip from doing this many times, I see a lot of students, they start to work and then they hop over that edge and they start to color over here by accident, especially how hard you have to push. So my pro tip for you is actually the second thing from the front, turn it over and trace the inside of that line. Be very careful because this is like the most vulnerable state because nothing's really solidified. Trace inside that line all the way around. Wherever you are, wherever you have a line, trace that out. And that way it creates more of an edge that will catch your tool. I like to think of it like a nice curb for your tool to sort of live with it. All right, if I turn this over and I feel and I look, it's starting to pop out. Just not, if I move this here, just not as dramatically as it's going to get, right? But it's starting to get there. All right, so this is my front. You gotta keep track of what's the front and what's the back. I just was on the back. I traced over every edge, right? And now I'm gonna start to use all of my tools and both ends of my tools to start to push that interior metal. I like to think of this as just coloring. So if I take this tool and I'm being very consistent and I'm going to start to color, essentially color that space up. And that's going to start to stretch that metal. Now I do want you to make note, do you see that little bit of a texture, right? It's a little scratchy. I'm going to work on making that flat. Be mindful you don't do something like that because you'll see that texture and you want to have the smoothest texture you can. So it really looks nice and solid. I like to use this side of the tool a lot to sort of push that out. And sometimes you'll get a little weird wrinkle that you have to be mindful that you are adjusting as you need. All right, so I'm gonna start to move up my A, moving my metal around in multiple directions. You see that? To make it easy. Oops. I don't want to push too hard at the first round. I just want to get it started. And we're going to come back and forth from the front to the back multiple times. Okay, so that is round one. You can see that texture is still there. So this is the front and that is the back. Once I do one round, I can start to see that it is, I can feel that it really is starting to pop off that metal. But I want to simultaneously start to use my tools to flatten the outside. It's really keeping it flat and keeping this popped up. Now, my favorite tools for this part of the process are actually this one and this guy to flatten. I like to use this because it's like a pencil and I do a lot of drawing just from the side. I'm going to come down on this outside edge and I'm going to sort of shade almost that, going right up to the edge and being careful, being mindful that I don't push inside, and any puckers, like right there, starts to pucker, I'm going to work that out. Okay. And right away, as I start to flatten that outside edge, you can see that that contrast makes that A look like it's popping out even more. I don't want to forget about this interior space either, because that technically is my background, right? So I want to push that in and down as well. Okay, what do you think? It's looking pretty cool. It might be hard to tell on camera, but you can really feel and see it in person. All right, so that was the first round. Then I want to bring my newspaper back over, flip it back over, and I want to continue to work and try my other tools perhaps, right? To see if I can stretch it a little bit more. Now you don't want to go crazy, but you do want it all to be consistent and popped out all the way. Then I can work from the front, again on the table. It's sort of back and forth from there. I can use another tool like this to really flatten that out and make sure I have really crisp edges. Okay, so that's really it. It's quite simple when you think about it. It just takes time to develop everything and to make your adjustments. All right, so if we think about this process, remember I have so many of these up in the front. So I want you to try one or two. I'm not gonna lie to you, I just made that look really easy. And when you grab this metal, you might think like, you start working, you're like, oh my God, this is a little bit harder than I thought. Try it out and then push it to the limit. Okay, so what do I mean by that? I mean, I want you to come in here and I want you to see, all right, just how far can I go? Right, if I start to push a little bit harder, how much pressure does it take to rip right through? Do you see that? Can you see that rip right there? It's a little hard to see probably on camera, but that rip, let me bring over, nah, it's okay. That rip right there, I just ripped straight through just by putting a little too much pressure. If that happens, I want you to be careful because this is extremely sharp on the back or on the front or both. So be careful with that. You can even bring it straight to me in person and I can try and fix it a little bit for you just by pushing the metal together. I'm not a magician. I can't put the metal really back together, but I can use the tools in different ways to sort of push it back a little bit. If you're doing this on your own, you would want to push that back using the table and the variety of tools to sort of like flatten it so you really can't see it too much. Most people will tear this tester stuff up like crazy. You learn the limits and how much pressure before you start to work on your actual piece. Okay? All right, so that's the main process. If you want to go back and rewatch that video of the steps, I would encourage you to do so. Remember, you're starting with your piece. You are sketching whatever you want on it. You're putting it on here, deepening those lines, flipping it over and tracing the inside curb or edge. And then you start to push that out, taking it to the table to flatten the outside surface. Now these are testers. I want you to beat them up. I want you to play. I want you to try and make it perfect, all that good stuff. And then when you think you're done, you're going to start to plan for your actual piece. For your actual piece, you are going to be using the actual size paper. In this paper or box here, I have all of it cut. And this is the paper we're going to be using because it's the exact same size as your piece of metal. This metal is going to be 6 by 6. We're calling this a mini project. I have bigger pieces of metal if you're interested later after you do one of these. Once you have your design, you're going to show it to me. I might ask you to make some changes to make it easier to translate to metal. And then you're gonna take your design and you're going to get some masking tape from me. You're gonna line it up, tape it, and then you would actually go ahead and trace your design on the newspaper, remove this, and then start that process yourself. All right, so this is a little bit later. I want you to try and test now. To show you what that might look like, I have my design that I have here. I'm going to be doing our White Plains logo here. You can see this outside circle, and the WP is what I'm interested in. I don't think this would translate well into metal because it's just a little too small, or that. So you can see I actually went to the light box, I traced what I wanted, and now I'm ready to start to put this on the metal. All right, so I'm going to do that quickly here at the end of this video. If you feel ready and confident to go get your supplies and get started, feel free. You can leave this on and watch. I'm gonna speed do this one right here, right now, because why not? Before I increase the speed, I have my design like I said. I'm going to use tape. Remember, we're staying away from the outside edges as much as we can. You're going to line that up, taping that on. Make sure it's exactly how you want. Let's tape this side on. And then I'm going to take this to my newspaper and I'm going to start to trace. So I'm going to come here, I'm just going to start to push. And I do have to push pretty hard to get through the paper, but you can see my design is going to transfer right onto the back. So I'm going to speed this up. I'm going to bring it back down to talk about the next part of this step, and then we'll speed it back up again. Okay, so I just traced over all of my design here, and I'm checking it on the back. I can see that I have all of my lines. Now I'm going to remove my sketch, and I do want to hang on to it. I wouldn't throw it away, just in case you need it. You can put that in your folder. And now I'm going to start that process we just talked about. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to deepen those lines because I was going through the paper and I sort of moved my it's not a pencil, but stick a little differently sometimes. I want to sort of solidify those lines a little bit more. So I'm going to take some time to do that, and then you're going to see me flip and start to push and pull. Okay, all right, I went ahead and I deepened my lines, right? You can see it's definitely not perfect, but I'm gonna work with it and work on it. This is not the material for perfection, so if you're a perfectionist like I am, it might be a little frustrating here and there, but it actually is quite therapeutic. All right, so my lines are nice and deep now. If I flip this over, I'm going to do that technique I showed before. We're paying attention to what's gonna pop out and what's gonna sit flat. For me, for this design, this background and in here, this internal space is going to be flat, and then the ring, the W and the P is going to come forward. So I'm going to come on this side and I'm going to trace on the inside of each space is going to pop out. I'm creating that curve, and then I'll start to push and pull that metal. Okay, starting to look better already. All right, now before I move forward, I'm gonna take my tools here and I'm just gonna flatten that outside edge because I can see that that's gonna help me keep that a little flat for a little bit longer. Oops, and that can happen right there, do you see that? I'm gonna come back over here and pull that open. And same thing on the inside. I didn't start pushing the inside of the letters yet, but I just feel like this space is so big. I want to start to push this down also. There's no right and wrong way. It's just sort of like dependent upon your design and what you're doing and what feels right at the time. Okay, so now I'm going to, one more little piece. All right, so now I feel more comfortable. It's starting, you can see it's starting to pop off that page, and I didn't really push anything out yet. I just like created my edges and made this nice and flat, and it already has popped it off. So now, working on the back, I'm gonna start to push and pull. I'm going to speed up this process a lot so you can see that happen over time. You'll see me come off and flatten and come back, back and forth, and then we'll talk about finishing up. All right, so I feel like I am just about done. I have a few things I want to perfect, but for the sake of this video and this piece, I think this is done for now. When you get to this point where you feel good, where you can see everything in nice sharp edges and it's stretched out enough for you, come show me in person. I want to come see it. I want to check in with you. I want to give you any tips and feedback. Like as I started talking, I noticed that maybe I want to deepen that line here and there to make it a little bit more clear. Show me, I'll give you some feedback.